The video computer system conversion of Atari's most iconic arcade hit marks the latest target in Triple Nine's Retro Game Review series. Starting 2026 with a 2600 title, that's no accident. And with a name that just so happens to start with A? If only there were 25 more letters to keep that theme going. Background viewing. While there are plenty of reviews for this game, there are also plenty of documentations about the development process for this port. From ambition, creativity, setbacks, and approval from management, I think the story outshines any individual review of the game. While I will hint at and allude to some of these things, a much more comprehensive presentation of the story of Asteroids for the 2600 can be found in the description below. So go ahead, give Atari Archive some attention. It is well deserved and well worth your time. Basics. Asteroids for the Atari 2600 is a single-screen space shooter based on Atari's smash hit arcade game from 1979. This home version was published by Atari and released in 1981, right around the peak of the VCS's popularity. You pilot a small cosmic spacecraft, as stated in the manual, at least in the backstory. The rest of the manual officially refers to it as your spaceship and your ship. Reportedly the result of a caffeine-fueled naming session in Sunnyvale, where the lore writer was clearly denied access to the conference room at Atari headquarters. Under certain circumstances, a satellite or UFO will occasionally enter the field, depending on what you have your difficulty switch set to, offering a chance to earn extra points, or get vaporized in the process. As with the arcade original, clearing a wave brings in a new one, faster and meaner. It's a simple formula with just enough ramping tension to keep you alert. Overview. Like its arcade counterpart, the 2600 version of Asteroid tasks you with a simple but addictive goal. Survive as long as you can while racking up points by blasting drifting space rocks and the occasional enemy ship. Each large asteroid breaks into smaller ones, multiplying the danger and the scoring potential. It's space janitorial work with a body count. The game is played with the standard joystick controller, although you and I already know. Plug in your Genesis controller for this one. With the one button used to fire and directional control handling rotation and thrust, and featured action, it's a pared down adaptation compared to the arcade original, but it retains the same core loop. Shoot, dodge, survive, repeat, then do it again and again. Points are awarded based on what you destroy. Large, medium, and small asteroids, satellites, and UFOs each have different values. Score high enough and you'll earn extra lives at regular intervals, giving you just enough rope to vaporize yourself with confidence. This game includes 66 variations, offering different combinations of difficulty, ship behavior, feature action, and number of players. I'll get into those a little bit later, but it's safe to say this cartridge is doing a lot with what it has. Like in the arcade, the screen wraps around. You can fly off one edge and reappear on the other, as can the asteroids. That constant wraparound adds a layer of tension and strategy, especially when fragments you thought you'd dodge suddenly sneak back in from the other side. And the light bulb moment when you realize your shots can wrap around too. Weak gaming now. Console switches. Power. Turns the game on. If this surprises you, I envy your journey. TV type. Toggles between color and black and white palettes, or at least that was the original intention. Its functionality is disabled in this game, one of the very first titles for the VCS to do so. Difficulty. Each player has their own difficulty switch. B is without enemy spacecraft, while A adds UFOs and satellites, for those craving a bit more chaos. Select. Cycles through the 66 game variations. You can speed this up by holding select and reset at the same time, which is as close as this game gets to a quality of life user experience. Reset. Starts the game. It's the one you'll keep reaching for after an untimely collision with a fast-moving pebble. My youthful experience. Cirrus, Pallas, Vesta. You know them by name because your passion for astronomy rivals mine. I'm sure. My love for space and my love for video games both date back to the mid-1980s. Two interests that often ran in parallel and occasionally intersected. Asteroids on the 2600 was one of those intersections. I must have been 7 or 8 when I added it to my small but growing collection. It wasn't the flashiest cartridge on the shelf, but it had staying power. Even if I didn't reach for it every time, whenever I did, it delivered. Solid gameplay, a decent challenge, and the kind of simple loop that kept me going for longer stretches than most Atari titles. Especially once I figured out how to stay alive a little longer than usual. I don't have vivid memories tied to it. No specific rainy Saturday night or high-score showdown comes to mind. But I remember the feeling. Focused, calm, probably leaning too close to the screen, trying to make one more shot count before the screen filled with rocks again. That's enough. That feeling stuck. The look. By today's standards, Asteroids on the 2600 will probably catch some flack for sprite flicker, minimal detail, and the usual retro shaming that early VCS titles tend to endure. But for its time, and for its hardware, this looks really good. Your ship, or space triangle if you're feeling abstract, looks like it came straight from Space War. We'll get to the physics that were potentially borrowed as well later, but visually, it gets the job done. The real visual standout is the asteroids themselves. Not only are they appropriately jagged and rocky, okay, perhaps lumpy works better, they're absurdly colorful. Shooting them feels like shattering a bag of Skittles at terminal velocity. Blast the rainbow! I've counted 8 different asteroid colors overall, with up to 6 different hues of rocky bodies on the screen at the same time. And that's just from a brief observation. Can you count more? By alternating which frame the game draws certain sprites on, a clever way to get around hardware limits, along with other tactics like bank switching, Asteroid accomplishes far more than the hardware was designed for. Yes, it has flicker, but in this case, it's a deliberate, effective compromise that lets the screen stay busy without crashing the whole operation. Thanks to image persistence, this flickering isn't bad at all, if you're playing as originally intended, on a tube television. Any flicker criticisms today are enhanced by modern displays, but on a CRT, the flickering just makes the sprite look a tad translucent. Flicker will be a distracting artifact in future titles I will cover, but for Asteroids, it's done well. It makes Asteroids a playable adaptation of the arcade game, on the 2600 no less. Enjoyable, and it's given its own identity. Asteroids on the 2600 doesn't rely on the name alone to sell copies. This game was made to be played. Enemy spacecraft, like the UFOs and satellites, are crisply drawn and move with purpose. Everything reads clearly, and the pitch-black backdrop? That's not a design shortcut. It's the vacuum of space. I mean, the Hubble Space Telescope hadn't launched yet, so there were no pillars of creation or deep field to slap in the background anyway. You get black. Deal with it. Sound. The first thing you'll probably notice, or feel, is the game's heartbeat. As you clear more asteroids, this ominous background pulse starts to quicken. It's not just a sound cue, it's a rising sense of pressure, ticking upward with each fragment cleared, letting you know you're almost done. And also, probably about to get obliterated by a rogue pebble drifting in from the screen. Once you're locked in, you'll hear the usual suspects. Your shots make a crisp little pew that's more sci-fi than firepower. And explosions, whether you're hitting rocks, UFOs, or just dying heroically, come with a thick, crunchy detonation noise that feels way more impactful than it has any right to. It's the audio equivalent of snapping a graham cracker over a campfire. The enemy spacecraft bring their own flavor to the mix. UFOs have a distant, high-pitched siren, while satellites give off more of a warbly, low-register hum. It's subtle, but they're distinct. And when either one shows up, it instantly puts you on edge. Not bad for a console whose sound chip has all the nuance of a dot matrix printer in action. Played back on magnetic audio tape. There's no music, of course. This is Asteroids. No ambient synths, no dramatic fanfare, just bleeps and boops. The kind of sound design that yells, function over form, louder than your triangle ship ever could. In space, no one can hear you scream, or explode. But if sound could propagate in the vacuum, the explosions here might actually be pretty close. Crunchy, abrupt, and satisfying in a weirdly tactile way. Technically inaccurate? Sure. But also, who cares? This is a video game, not a physics lecture, and these sound effects aren't just good for the 2600. They're genuinely effective. An attribute, not a nitpick. Gameplay. Asteroids for the 2600 keeps the same general loop as its arcade ancestor. Rotate, thrust, shoot, survive. But this is the VCS. So it comes with quirks, trade-offs, and its own peculiar charms. You control your cosmic spacecraft. Yeah, it's the official title the manual uses briefly before settling into your ship, like a normal person. You control your cosmic spacecraft using the joystick's left and right directions to rotate your ship counterclockwise or clockwise. Pushing up applies thrust, lumbering, weighty, glorious thrust. The sense of inertia is fantastic. Once you're moving, you keep moving, unless something kills you, or you start inexplicably slowing down. Realistic space physics? Mostly. Realistic space physics with just enough imaginary drag to keep things playable? Absolutely. Pressing down on the joystick triggers a special feature, depending on the game mode. Hyperspace, shields, 180-degree turn, or nothing. Let's break them down. Hyperspace. The arcade classic. It doesn't randomly vaporize you like in the coin-op, but it will sometimes drop you directly in front of an oncoming rock, so the same chaotic energy applies. Think of it as a fast travel lottery to your funeral. Shields. A defensive feature that keeps you safe. Briefly. You can use it safely for up to 2 seconds, but if you cross that threshold, kaboom. It's a shield with a ticking timer strapped to it. Use wisely. 180 flip. Instantly flips your ship to face the opposite direction. Ideal for aggressive gameplay, or when you just can't be bothered to rotate normally. No feature. Self-explanatory. In a universe with infinite possibilities, you choose none of the above. The action button fires your shots. Up to 2 can exist on screen at once, which is half the firepower of the arcade version. But considering the 2600 is busy juggling rainbow rocks and flickering enemies, you'll take what you can get. As for the asteroids themselves, blasting a large rock splits it into 2 mediums. Hitting a medium converts it into a small one. Hitting a small one removes it from existence entirely. Basic space geology. Hitting asteroids will slightly alter their trajectory. A nice physics touch, which is either tactical brilliance or chaos theory, depending on how much credit you're willing to give yourself. The arcade version escalates by piling on more and more rocks, but the 2600 caps large asteroids at 8 on screen at a time. That's not laziness, it's mercy, or limitation induced. Choose your own reality here. Enemy spacecraft, UFOs or satellites, can also appear if the difficulty switch is set to A. And yes, they're dangerous, but they are often irrelevant too. Regardless, they're worth big points, which makes them delightfully dangerous. Or so it would seem. They traverse the screen mostly horizontally, shooting without purpose or discretion, often not threatening you at all. They'll either get taken out by an asteroid, your shot, or make it to the other side unscathed. While you can die to them, the threat is more implied than real. The excitement of a point surge can distract you enough to lose a ship far more often than them dealing a fatal blow to you with anything resembling precision shooting. And while we're at it, here's a touch of strategy. While the controls are fun and have a surprising amount of finesse, they're undercut slightly by the game's technical bias. Vertical motion is evidently easier for the 2600 to handle than horizontal, so staying towards the center and shooting asteroids to either side is often the safest play. It turns out the most dangerous part of space is the left and right edges. So we mentioned there are 66 game variations in total. Combinations of different speeds, extra life thresholds, every 5k, 10k, or 2k points, or never. And featured actions, which I described all of 0 minutes ago. Okay, maybe 1. Speaking of features, Asteroids is equipped with Teddy Bear Mode, a beginner-friendly setup for children. It's a nice gesture, but it dumbs things down so much it feels like putting training wheels on a shopping cart. Sure, it moves, but it's not going to take you anywhere interesting. And remember, you've got those difficulty switches. If you've only been looking at the game select matrix in the manual, you're only seeing half of the possibilities. Although, if you're considering playing on difficulty B, okay, fine. You do you. Learning the controls takes time, especially the strange rotational physics and delayed acceleration. But once it clicks, it really clicks. Understanding spawns and movement quirks make this version more predictable than the arcade, and honestly, easier to get deep into. The don't move unless absolutely necessary strategy, although effective, it does dampen the dynamic physics of this game. You can survive much longer, but lose the challenge of thrust and inertia management. Depending on you, this could be a benefit or a detriment. Jury's still out on this one. For me, it's personal. I played this version the most, and I played it during the formative "shut up, I'm gaming" era of my childhood. Young, impressionable, eager to blast away. That's the EVAD that existed when this game entered my household. While the Atari 7800 version is far superior in absolutely every measurable way, better graphics, cleaner controls, amazing two-player modes, phenomenal two-player modes. It's basically the holy grail of home console ports. This little 2600 port feels like home to me, and that counts for something. Other. Porting Asteroids to the Atari 2600 was no small feat. The arcade original was a vector-based game with specialized display and crisp monochrome lines that glowed with mathematical elegance. The VCS, on the other hand, had a different philosophy. What if we just make everything flicker and hope no one notices? Despite the vastly different hardware, the port holds up remarkably well. It trades sleek vectors for a storm of multicolored blobs. But that visual pivot wasn't just for show. It was necessity meets ingenuity. The 2600 can't do vector graphics. Period. So instead of clean lines, you get something that looks like Skittles in a dryer. But it works. And the Rainbow Chaos actually gives this port a unique flavor, even if it's less arcade fidelity and more fruit salad in orbit. The developer also employed bank switching, a technique used to squeeze more out of limited memory by swapping sections of code in and out. It's a bit like trying to run a restaurant kitchen with only one burner, but you keep switching out the pots and pans fast enough that no one notices you are technically under-equipped. Or another way to imagine it. Like a magician with only one hand visible at a time, Asteroids hides its extra 4KB up its sleeve, until it needs to pull out a new trick. Neither the coin-op nor the 2600 versions of Asteroids was meant to let players survive for ages on a single run. But clever players quickly found out ways to break that unspoken rule. In the arcade, techniques like lurking, just above the saucer's predictable firing zone, lets you milk the score counter far beyond what any coin-op developer would have smiled upon. On the 2600, the same spirit applies, even if the tactics differ. You don't need twitch reflexes or ninja-grade rotation, just a willingness to experiment, find the safe zones, and play smarter instead of harder. What started as a frenetic blastathon turns into something more strategic, a battle of angles, positioning, and patience. Especially if you figured out those traitorous screen edges aren't just dangerous, they're avoidable. Let's also address the science, or complete disregard for it. Audible sirens and explosions in the vacuum of the cosmos? Check. Asteroids clustered so tightly they should be gravitationally bound, but aren't? You bet. And your ship mysteriously slows down in open space, violating Newton's first law, unless you assume the existence of a vast, invisible mist of brake dust. It's nonsense. But it's entertaining nonsense. And since we're already being unreasonably pedantic, real asteroid fields and belts, like the one between Mars and Jupiter, they're incredibly sparsely populated. In real life, flying through the asteroid belt would look like empty space, with the occasional potato drifting by in its predictable orbit around the Sun, with a semi-major axis of 2 to 4 AU. Which you would also be doing if you were just chilling in the same region. But that's not much of a video game, is it? Lastly, let's appreciate the physical packaging. The box art, manual, and label depict a gloriously dramatic starfighter, battling dense fields of jagged rocks with sparks flying and perspective lines slicing into deep space. It's all very Star Wars adjacent. Bold, kinetic, and maybe a bit aspirational, given the flickering realities of what appears on screen. Still, you were a kid in the early 80s? That artwork might have been the thing that sealed the deal. You weren't just buying a cartridge, you were signing up to save the galaxy from your living room with a joystick the size of a Rubik's Cube. Me, myself, and sometimes you. Game modes 34 through 66 are the two-player equivalents of 1 through 33. It's classic, alternating play. One ship per person, swapping control when somebody explodes. Simple enough. But here's the thing. Asteroids on the 2600 is a game that, once you've hit your groove, you can stay in it for a while. If you're playing with somebody who's particularly good at it, or just better than you, get comfy. You might be waiting a while. On the flip side, it is nice that two-player support exists at all. This was no guarantee back then, and many a game might have benefited from that extra option. That said, there's not much personalization here. The game matrix gives you various combinations of features, speed, score thresholds for extra lives, and the featured special action, hyperspace fields, 180 flip, nothing. But in two-player mode, both players get the same setup. Both players still get it, but they're tethered to the same setup. The only thing you can toggle per person is whether the enemy spacecraft, UFOs and satellites, appear, by flipping those individual difficulty switches. I suppose one could imagine a version where, say, only one player gets hyperspace or earns extra lives every 5,000 points, but that kind of micro-customization just wasn't the vibe in 1981. You took turns, picked a mode, and hope your little brother would stop asking why all the rocks looked like fruity pebbles. And honestly, Asteroids is at its best as a solo experience. Not just because of the alternating play mechanics, but because the shift between players can be jarring. Especially after a long stretch of watching and suddenly realizing, oh, that's me now. It's easy to lose the flow. So sure, two-player mode is a thoughtful inclusion, and it gives the game some shared experience value. But for me, it's a one-player classic. If you're actively gaming with someone and want to tag team space rock destruction with a partner in a more meaningful way, a way that resonates far beyond the outer reaches of our galaxy. I cannot give a better suggestion than the 7800 port. It's not a faithful recreation of the arcade either, but it's got excellent graphics, phenomenal two-player options, and it is hands down the cream of the crop when it comes to home ports of this game. Who would enjoy this? I'm a firm believer that there's fun to be had in any game. Yes, even the ones that make you question your life choices. Fortunately, Asteroids for the 2600 isn't one of those. It delivers magnificently. Now, fans of the arcade original might turn their noses up at this port for lacking the glowing vector flashiness or the twitchy quarter siphoning pace. And sure, it is not a one-to-one clone. But for the rest of us mere mortals, it holds up surprisingly well. Graphically, it's dated, because it's from 1981. What is real, though, is how tight the gameplay feels. And it's not something you could assume back then. Or now, frankly. Just take a leisurely scroll through the Google Play Store, where every third title looks like it was designed by a committee of goldfish and monetized by a casino. Whether you're up for a quick blast or a long contemplative high-score session where your thumbs go numb, this game has you covered. Some will find it repetitive or boring. Others will find it to be retro gaming comfort food. Low res, flicker, total satisfaction. So, which camp do you fall into? Choose wisely. Your space triangle is counting on you. Legacy. Asteroids will forever be one of the most notable arcade games of all time. That legacy is basically etched into granite. And not the break apart into medium-sized chunks kind. With new cabinets featuring modern games, not exactly rolling out at golden age pace, its place in history seems pretty secure. It's not going to be forgotten. But what about the home ports? This version landed right during the peak years of the 2600, and the aftermarket reflects that loud and clear. It's everywhere. You won't need to hunt it down. It'll come to you. Honestly, I advise against buying it intentionally. Just pick up a couple affordable Atari lots and you'll conveniently end up with 2 or 3 copies before you realize it. Do you already have a 2600 collection? Then congratulations, you already own Asteroids. This port will probably survive the next few decades through retro compilations and hardware emulations. But beyond that, hard to say. It's a good game, undeniably so. But time isn't exactly kind to even the most iconic titles. Games just don't stop coming out, and cultural memory is a finite resource. Much like how Westerns ruled the airwaves until they quietly moseyed off into the sunset, there's a real possibility that Asteroids, and the 2600 library in general, could suffer the same slow fade into irrelevance for younger generations. That said, this is a console-defining game. Whether or not anyone's still playing it in 2075, I firmly believe no VCS collection is complete without it. Even if it comes bundled with 3 other games and a half a dust bunny. Overall, it's a fun game. Every mall had its anchor stores, and every console has its anchor titles. And Asteroids is absolutely one of those for the Atari 2600. It's not the flashiest, and it's not the most addictive. It's not even a game I'd call essential for a play session. But for the collection, for the legacy of the console, foundational. The look is colorful and chaotic in all the right ways. The sound, minimal but effective, pulls you in. The gameplay, surprisingly deep once you get the hang of it. And even with its quirks and corners, it holds up better than it probably has any right to. I like this version of Asteroids. A lot. It's my favorite one. Not the best, but my favorite. And I can make that distinction. There's nostalgia at play here, absolutely. But I'm not as tethered to it as I am to some other childhood escapades. If I never play it again, I won't lose sleep over it. It's in my regular rotation now, and I'll definitely revisit it. But it doesn't have to be, and I don't have to. I can live without it. So, it is what it is. But more importantly, it was what it was. And what it was? A little space triangle flying through a rainbow of rocks, dodging death in pixelated silence. It was a game I grew into, not one I obsessed over. A steady presence. The kind of thing that lives on in the background of a young gamer's life, until one day, years later, you realize it was part of your story the whole time. Not every memory needs to be specific. Some of them are just feelings, a sense of time and place. A game that didn't shout for your attention, but was always there when you needed it. For me, Asteroids is one of those. Not a thunderclap, but a heartbeat. And maybe that's enough. Next. The 2600 reviews in 2026 moves forward and turns to its all-purpose contingency plan. You mean Plan B? Yes. B. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you next mission.